Today is March 9th. This is a Building and Standards meeting, City of Rowlett. It's now 6:05 p.m. I'm going to call the meeting into order. First thing, as authorized by Section 551.071 Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened to a closed executive session for purpose seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any item on the agenda. The City Building Standards Commission reserves the right to reconvene or realign at the regular session, call an executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. I've got in here election of chair, vice chair. What's it on here for? This is a thing.
Just two different things compared to
Do I get what?
You need a chair elect of this.
You can discuss, I guess, if you want to elect a chair for the Building Standards Commission. Chair and
Okay,
vice
so it's
chair.
not the same. Okay.
It can be.
So we have a call to order. We have an item to elect a chair, vice chair, 2021-2022 term.
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be a good idea to keep the same chair that's existing on the Board of Adjustments to also chair and vice chair this meeting for this group. And I would, if you're ready for nominations, I would nominate yourself.
Okay, I'm open nominations. Mr. Mosley,
I nominate Ken Romaine as chairman.
Okay. Anyone to second that?
Let's quickly discuss before that. I don't know.
Okay, sure.
No, fine.
I'm just trying to, we've never had one of these yet.
Right.
So I guess trying to understand exactly
Well, it's
where we're going to go here ultimately. I read the packet fully, so
Yeah.
since we've never included this in any of our stuff in the past, you know, is there some direction here about?
Actually, the BOA has historically served in the capacity of the Building Standards Commission after the tornado.
I remember we just had it back then.
Yeah,
We weren't asked to have a separate chair back then. We just did that part of it. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so instead of serving as a Board of Adjustment, when you sit as a Building Standards Commission, you can have a different chair and vice chair. You don't have to if you don't want to. But I think the reason why this is up on the agenda for election of chair and vice chair is so that you guys can make that choice.
well, as legal counsel at this aspect, is that recommended to have, or suggested, or just really doesn't matter?
However you want to do it.
I mean, I don't have a disagreement with the nomination. I'm just looking to understand this. Before we did this in 16, we just molded it as part of our job responsibilities. Sure. But here is trying to figure out where we're trying to go.
So let me, by analogy, City Council has a mayor and a mayor pro tem. But we also have church boards comprised of all the city council. When they wear the church board hats, they have different chairs and vice chair. That's just because that's how they choose to do it. You don't have to have a different chair and vice chair if you want to. Your choice.
I'm just looking for some sense of guidance, because I don't even know where this is going to go. I mean, we've managed to go into now and anticipated possibly every other month meeting, if it's available, for the BOA. We just missed the last one, of course, didn't have one, but now I don't know how often. Is this going to start becoming a regular thing for us to work through now, or what are your thoughts about that?
So, as part of the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code, there are some items that relate to specifically the building or the structure. Is it dangerous? Is it, those types of things. And so, as part of that function and adoption of that code, we created the Building Standards Commission, which is the Board of Adjustment. So, just by nature of it, you won't, given the size of the city and as we keep moving forward, you won't see too many cases coming forward. But we do want to have a distinction between the two boards.
So they will always be separate meetings?
They will always be separate meetings.
Going to give you practical advice?
I'm all ears.
Don't do anything else? Keep the same chair for BOA as chair for...
Well, again, I'm not opposed to
No,
it.
no,
I'm just trying to
no, that's
understand exactly, because we've never done this.
And the reason why it's on the agenda is because we know this is a specific board and commission, so we wanted to give that opportunity to yourselves and not just want to guide you through this. So we're giving you this option, was the purpose of it.
And when I read through the stuff, I didn't catch that line. I just like,
Well, I remember when I did planning and zoning and we had the other commissions, the other groups, and all the, it was different but the same. And, that's why I just thought for the, really, I just thought for the sake of simplicity, if the same group is kind of a honcho and a vice honcho, it makes sense to me, but that's my whole point.
I'll go as far as to agree, and I would second. Again, trying to understand what we're doing here is just a question, so.
It was purely to keep it on the agenda for transparency purposes, because this is a specific board. And
Yes.
so we wanted to make sure that we gave that opportunity to you. For continuity purposes, I think it's, feasible to stick to what you have.
Right.
With Ken as the chair and Sona, I think, as vice chair.
okay, so for clarification,
I can't
welcome
sit
Donna.
back in the shadows.
No, then let that happen.
I'm sorry. I sent Susan an email before I left. I was finishing up. But
I'm in London.
So real quick clarification, if we needed to elect a chair and vice chair for the building standards board. And honestly, I read through this thing a couple days ago and didn't click in my head. I just read it down to the book. And I think we had a motion from Mr. Mosley. And we want to just restart that, we can get going here and clean it up.
I just make a motion that if we're doing one at a time, then I make a motion for Ken Rowan to be chairman of the Rowlett Building Standards Commission, committee, whatever.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
We have Carissa seconded that. Thank you. And we need one for Donna also then.
There's no other nomination,
Right.
so then you're chair.
Oh, I get a vote on that too, I'm sorry. I'm not running this much tonight. Okay, we need to vote on that then?
All in favor?
Aye.
So you didn't do the vice chair though? So.
No, we need to do vice chair now. Do we have a,
I make a motion, we nominate Donna to flow with the BOA to be the actual vice chair of this particular case as well.
so we have Chris, a motion for Donna, and
I'll second that.
James is seconded that. We need to vote on that also, please. It's like, okay.
You can vote two more.
Yeah. Okay. Get three at least. We get anonymous. Okay. All right, so I think we have that taken care of. That puts on item 3 then, executive session. The building standards shall convene to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071. Consult the attorney and seek legal advice, training from the city attorney. Okay, so we're in executive session now. 5-minute bio break. Be back in the room by 7 to start our normal session. Okay, now 6:55. Okay, this is the Rowlett Board of Standards meeting. We've just come out of executive session. We want to open up, and our regular session here is now 10 minutes after 7 on the 9th of March. So we'll call this meeting to order. Okay. I guess as certainly this very first thing again. Okay, we just came as authorized by section 551.07071 Texas Department of Code. A meeting may be converted to executive session, closed session. We just had that. We came out of that session. We're back at our regular Rowlett City Rowlett Board of Standards Commission meeting, and I called to order. I want to So at this point, I guess item 4, do we have anyone in the audience wants to speak during citizens' input? You can provide information to us. We cannot respond to you. If you're not in the audience, you can also send email prior to the meeting by 3 p.m. The citizens input at rowlett.com. Do I have anybody in the audience who wants to speak to the board? We have 3 minutes for you. The applicant, they can still speak? Why don't you wait?
I would recommend that they speak during their item.
Okay. So, yeah, Mr. Is it Miller?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can have you speak specifically your agenda item when it comes up here in a moment. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I see no other people in the audience wishing to speak then. Maybe we can move on to our action items for this evening. We are 5A, receive a report, a presentation from the chief building officials to discuss and continue to consider whether the building at 1925 Cheetah Road meets defined dangerous structure, determine actions required to make the structure comply to city regulations. Welcome.
Here we go. Good evening, commission members. I'm Dale Jackson. I'm the chief building official for the city of Rowlett. And to give you a little bit of background, you had a little background from the city attorney earlier, but Chapter 54 of the Texas Local Government Code does authorize cities to create a building and standards commission to allow for the abatement of substandard buildings within a city. The city of Rowlett adopted an ordinance creating the Building and Standards Commission in the city of Rowlett on March 16, 2021. Also at that same meeting, the city of Rowlett, the council adopted the 2018 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code. So this is the code that contains the minimum requirements for buildings and identifies when a building is considered unsafe or dangerous. On this particular case, an inspection was performed on the property at 1925 Cheetah on February 16, 2022. The inspection included the fire marshal, fire inspector, our plans examiner, senior environmental health officer, and myself as the chief building official. The inspection did reveal a number of safety violations that warranted a hearing of this commission. The staff is requesting that the commission declare 2 of the buildings on this property as dangerous buildings and order the demolition of those buildings. Well, so the first item, when you look at section 108.1.5 of the International Property Maintenance Code, it states that the definition of what a dangerous building or structure or premises is. It states for the purposes of this code, any structure or premises that has any or all of the conditions or defects described as follows shall be considered to be dangerous. Number 1 in that list is any door, aisle, passageway, stairway, exit, or other means of egress that does not conform to the approved building or fire code of the jurisdiction as related to the requirements for buildings, existing buildings. You can see in this picture there's an arrow indicating that where the door was at one time and has been walled off and does not exist any longer. So that exit has been removed. Number 2 on that list is the walking surface of any aisle, passageway, stairway, exit, or other means of egress is so warped, worn, torn loose, or otherwise unsafe as to not provide safe and adequate means of egress. And you can see that there's portions of this building that do not have a floor, so obviously it's not going to provide for a safe egress from the building when there's no floor to walk on. Number 3 from that list is any portion of the building structure or appurtenance that has been damaged by fire, earthquake, wind, flood, deterioration, neglect, abandonment, vandalism, or any other cause to such an extent that it is likely to partially or completely collapse or become detached or dislodged. And you can see multiple items in this picture that are detaching from the building and are possibility that they will detach from the building. Item number 4, any portion of a building or any member, appurtenance, or ornamentation on the exterior thereof that is not of sufficient strength or stability, or is not so anchored, attached, or fastened in place so as to be capable of resisting natural or artificial loads of 1 1/2 the original design load value. You can see the main beam that this the pointer is pointing to, the arrow, and it shows that there's a major deflection in that beam. And it's obvious in here that the loads on that are not being carried by that main beam, and it is in structural distress. 5, the building or structure or part of a building or structure because of dilapidation, deterioration, decay, faulty construction, the removal or movement of some portion of the ground necessary for the support or for any other reason is likely to partially or completely collapse, or some portion of the foundation or underpinning of the building or structure is likely to fail to give way. We point back to the other items that we saw previously on the top right and bottom left picture, where we have the beam that is deflecting on the bottom left. We also have pointers that are showing areas on both the bottom pictures where the roof decking has become decayed to a point that it's changed colors and it is structurally inadequate at this point in time. And then you can also see at the top left picture that there is a brace holding up a portion of the wall. Number 6 on that list is the building or structure or any portion thereof is clearly unsafe for its use and occupancy. We don't have a floor within this building in large portions of it. Obviously, that is not safe for anyone to live in that or to occupy it in any way. 7 is the building or structure is neglected, damaged, or dilapidated, unsecured, or abandoned so as to become an attractive nuisance to children who might play in the building or structure to their danger. It becomes a vagrant or a harbor for vagrants, criminals, or immoral persons, or enables persons to resort to the building or structure for committing a nuisance or an unlawful act. Now, as we talked about earlier, the floor does not exist within this building. It's a simple matter to gain entrance into the building because there's no underpinning around the building. Anyone that crawls underneath the building can crawl right into the building. Whether that be a child, a homeless person, or whoever, they have direct access to the building, and as such, it meets this definition and becomes an attractive nuisance to children and vagrants. Number 8 from the list is any building or structure has been constructed, exists, or is maintained in violation of any specific requirement or prohibition applicable to such building or structure provided by the approved building or fire code of the jurisdiction, or any law or ordinance to such an extent as to present either a substantial risk of fire, building collapse, or any other threat to life and safety. At the end of the arrow, you can see that there is a connection of the electrical system that's easily within reach of any human being other than an infant possibly, but it's wide open. It's not within a required electrical box. It becomes an electrocution hazard. It can also be a fire hazard as well because it's not properly maintained as is required by the National Electrical Code. And because of that, this particular section, or this particular picture does show that this section is being violated specifically by the electrical conditions that exist on the property at this time. 9 of this list is a building or structure used or intended to be used for a dwelling purpose because of inadequate maintenance, dilapidation, decay, damage, faulty construction or arrangement, inadequate light, ventilation, mechanical or plumbing system, or otherwise, is determined by the code official to be sanitary, unfit for human habitation, or in such a condition that is likely to cause sickness or disease. Now, obviously, we've shown some other things previously where there's no floor. That's obviously not going to be fit for habitation. But we also see that we have an HVAC system that has disconnected wires. It obviously is not operational. And the property maintenance code does require you to be able to heat the building to a minimum of 68 degrees Fahrenheit in all portions of the building in order for it to be habitable. This is a requirement that's been in the code for years to protect people from freezing conditions and keep them from becoming ill. In this particular situation, this is another condition that has been met of clarifying and defining this as a dangerous building. Then the last item that we have on the list is any structure or building because of a lack of sufficient proper fire resistance rated construction, fire protection systems, electrical system, fuel connections, mechanical system, plumbing system, or other cause is determined by the code official to be a threat to life or health. In this situation, this is the same electrical connection that was run to a front light on the property. This particular wire is run across the top of the ground. It is open for any child to touch, grab, pull, whatever. And the electrical code requires that to either be in conduit or buried in the ground and compliant with protection. There is no protection for this wire, and it is subject to causing electrocution to someone that's within the area. Staff recommendation on this. Staff recommends that the Building and Standards Commission declare the main building and the shop building that was shown with the deflected beam as dangerous buildings and require the property owner to demolish the buildings within 60 days. If the property owner fails to demolish the buildings within 60 days, the commission will request that the commission authorize the city of Rowlett to demolish the buildings and file a lien against the property for the cost of demolition plus administrative fees. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Jackson, I'm curious, that inspection was held on the 16th of February this year.
Yes.
I'd like to know what the history of this is prior to 16 February. I mean, this is a pretty severe action, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the property owner. But I'd like to hear the city's explanation of how this came up. I mean, this isn't something that just started on the 16th of February, I'm sure. And I'd like to know how long, what kind of meetings you've had with the property owner prior to the 16th of February, if there are any citations, violations have been issued prior to that.
So we have not had any meetings with the property owner at this point in time. We have seen over a period of several months modifications made to the building. There was previously a roof that was started above the roof that exists for the mobile home. No permit was issued for that. That did require a permit. There was the door was closed in. No permits have been issued for any of the work that was done. And because of the condition of the building, there was some question with that we discussed earlier and with the city attorney as to how we got to this point with creating the commission. There were some questions with the previous board that was repealed, and at that time, there was no process for going through a demolition or declaring a project or a building or a structure as substandard, other than the building official making that determination. And so we did not make that determination because we felt that that was not in the best interest of the city. It was best interest to create this board and bring things forward. Because of COVID and other issues, there was some delays, and so that's where we're at.
So just to reiterate, there's been no contact up to today with the property owner as far as any of these violations or perceived violations of the code or anything like that? Am I correct in saying that?
There was a notice that was sent out on February, I don't remember the exact date, but it was sent out, and state law does require a 10-day notice of this hearing. We did meet with the property owner on site when the inspection was made and discuss that, but prior to that, no.
So prior to beginning of February, there's been no contact with the property owner, there's been no violations issued. This is, nobody's been out there telling them that you need to take care of this like last year sometime, as far as you know.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
I have questions after a while. I was want to hear from the applicant.
No, at this time, Mr. Miller, will you wish to speak to the board? Mr. Miller, as custom, will you state your name and address for the board, the city for records?
Matthew Miller, 1925 Cheezel Road, Rowlett, Texas, 75088, 3410 Sunlight Drive, where I reside at right now. I agree with everything what he said about the building and everything else. But I was in the process of refurbishing it. You understand, rebuilding it. The front part is rebuilding, but they started going in, so I had to board it up. Code enforcement told me to board it up. So I boarded it up, the front parts, till I got to the back part of it. So I'm still in the process of doing what I was supposed to do. Rebuild the whole thing, better than it was at first. So I just got behind, because I'm doing the work myself. And so all other violations, everything else can be corrected. Because I am a construction person myself. I've been there 55 years. I've been building on it ever since I've been there. So it just got out of hand in time. When you come to get 80 years old, you slows up. But whatever y'all come up with, but I'm still going to stand on the grandfather clause. The grandfather clause said anything that you was doing before the city annexed you in, as long as you keep up to par, you know. So that was the background. Because if I tear it down all the way down, then you got the right to come and move my construction yard. And I'm not going for that. Because that's my living. It's been there, my living there since I've been here. I works out off the place. But for the building part, it can be brought up to code real easy. I just ain't got around to getting to that point. So that's why I stand.
Can we ask questions, David?
Sure.
So, this is your primary residence also is there, or your business is there?
We run it to use it as a construction yard because we run our business out of it. But I live at 3410 Sunlight Drive.
Okay.
but I work there every day.
Mr. Miller, you've seen what the city has said that the specific areas that don't meet code. I'm not familiar with any grandfather clause, and maybe this, somebody can illuminate me on that I'm unaware of. Mr. City Attorney?
If we annex real estate, the pre-existing business uses are allowed to continue, notwithstanding the annexation. We're not talking about the business use here. We're not talking about commercial use of real estate. We're talking about a substandard structure and a public nuisance. The grandfathering provisions in Chapter 43 of the Local Government Code don't apply to nuisances, and you can't grandfather a public or a private nuisance. And this, what we've seen thus far, constitutes a public nuisance. I don't think that staff is recommending that this commission consider terminating what may or may not be a lawful business use of the real estate. All we're talking about here is the structure itself.
So from the attorney's point of view, is we're talking about the structure and not the grandfather. How long would it take you realistically, in your opinion, to build that property up to meet all the codes that the city's talking about, Mr. Miller? Do you have any idea how long it would take you to do that? That seems an extensive project, and do you think you could realistically, in a set amount of time, bring that building up to city standards that they're talking about? I mean, and I'm talking about, you know, the city, you've seen what the city is saying. They're recommending 60 days. That's not much time at all. What would you think? How long would you think it would take you to meet the city code requirements and standards, building standards requirements that you've identified? How long do you think it would take you to meet all those requirements?
Maybe 60 to 90 days.
You think you could get the building up in 60 to 90 days?
Most of what they've seen is where I already started demoing.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know, is what realistically, what you think you could do in a set time period to meet all the standards that the city has identified that you're delinquent in, you know, the flooring and all that stuff that you saw the slides. So
that get most all of the what's called done, everything else, and then started restructuring the back part because the front part is already built. I just have to take the plywood off and go ahead and face it up.
So if this commission were, just for an example, to give you some extra time, you're positive that you could get it up to standard?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I have a question. Tell me exactly what your plan is. I mean, what do you mean by, you know, improving the structure, and what exactly do you plan to do?
I'm looking at, I don't know what my son is thinking about it, unit for office.
Okay. And so what exactly are you planning to do to the building to bring it up to a suitable office?
Just like the other building, it's already, the front part already framed with 2 And what was added first, it was 1.5 by 1.5 stuff for a mobile home. But I'm bringing it up to code just like a regular house with the building, which is heavy and it won't be able to move like a mobile home.
Are you going to rebuild the structure because there was some ceilings that were sagging, the framing, and so it sounded like the structure itself was not.
That's in my garage, my workshop, what you talking about.
And are you intending to pull permits to do this work since you haven't done that yet? Have you started on getting permits?
Well, we in the code enforcement, I didn't have to pull a permit. That's refurbished my building myself because I need it done. Because that goes back to the grandfather clause. Anything that I change to the city ordinance, my clause go away.
Okay, so there's electrical work that needs to be done, which you need to have licensed electricians to do and permits for that. There's HVAC permits for that. I didn't hear anything about plumbing. Is there plumbing functional? Is there plumbing in it?
Functional.
Okay. So I mean, there's a lot of specialized improvements that are necessary to bring this up to code. And you think you can get that done in 90 days, but you do have to apply for appropriate permits in order to do that. And so I'm just wondering, how far along are you on, the planning process and securing the appropriate contractors to do that work? Or do you have, since you said you've been contracting, do you have those skills?
I am the contractor. That's where you get don't know. I'm telling you, I do the work myself. I'm not. I've been doing it ever since I've been there.
So are you an electrician and HVAC?
Anything that I need to do, I can do it.
Okay. So I don't know, as far as the city's requirements, is that allowed? Is that going to be permitted without the actual?
Go back to the grandfather clause.
Well,
Whatever I was doing before the city annexed me in, I can still do it.
Well, the attorney, I thought he said that was not grandfathered.
But the building is on the grandfather clause as well.
Sir, I mean, would you?
It is my understanding that the structure, the property is owned single-family residential. He's been using it as a commercial use, a business or industrial use. I don't know if it preceded the adoption of the single-family zoning on the tract or not. For giving him the benefit of the doubt, if the structure is in fact a non-conforming structure, which it clearly is, it's a structure being used for business purposes in a single-family residential district. If he destroys it or demolishes it, or is damaged to at least 50% of its fair market value, he can't reconstruct it to its pre-existing non-conforming status. If he's simply doing repairs and renovations, I think that's okay. I think he can do that.
Exactly.
But in order to do the kind of work that he's talking about, based on pictures that I've seen, I can't tell you whether or not for sure that a permit is going to be required. Doesn't matter if he does the work himself or he hires a contractor to do it for him. I think the International Building Code would require permit applications and plans to be submitted, but he's going to have to deal with staff on that. It may be that if we reschedule this for 90 days, we come back in 90 days and staff tells you he applied for a permit, but he couldn't get one because it doesn't have a proper electrician, plumber, whatever. So maybe Dale can help us out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask Dale to address those issues with what he needs to do. He's intending to do it himself.
So the issue here is that plumbing cannot be done on anything other than a dwelling that is homesteaded by the person unless they're a licensed plumber. So if Mr. Miller did plumbing work on this building, it would violate state law unless he had a state or Texas plumbing license. The same thing with electrical. He's not allowed to do electrical work on this. If he does, he violates state law because he's required to have an electrical license in order to do electrical work. The same thing with heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. He's required to have a mechanical license to do mechanical work. But in all three instances, if you are homesteading that property, you own it, you live there, then the state law does give you an exception from those licensing requirements. Obviously, Mr. Miller doesn't live there, no one lives there. The other issue that does come up is that it was originally built as a mobile home, and now he's proposing to use it as a business. And our ordinance does allow for non-conforming rights to continue, but if a building is vacant for more than 6 months, those non-conforming rights cease, and they stop at that point. and I don't believe that it's been occupied in the last 6 months.
Mr. Miller, have you met with the city planning department or the building department at all prior to this 16th of February?
Nope.
So nobody, this issue you're talking about, the grandfather issue, and the way you see it, and the building and all these problems, the first, you said you dealt with the code enforcement people? When was that? Was that this year or last year?
Last year.
Was it a lot of meetings with the code enforcement people? Or just one where they said this, you
One.
need to do something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, this is clearly an issue that needs to be sussed out with the property owner in a different venue prior to coming up here and talking about the actions that this commission can do.
Something I was thinking about possibly as an idea, and let people put their comments in. One I see is getting the structure as safe as possible to the neighborhood. And in thought, to me, that might be having the power meter pulled until the city and Mr. Miller can come up with a plan of what needs to be done to get the structure safe and get it on a track for a reasonable time frame to get it to standard. That's just me speaking out loud thinking. I'd like to hear from the rest of the board here about their thoughts.
I actually have a question. Are you currently occupying this space, or is this currently being used as a construction site to repair the facility?
Use as a construction site for property.
Okay, so there's no life safety issue with an occupied space at this point? Thank you. All right, so I'll chime in a little bit. So question one, tell me again how long you own that property? Is that the 50-something years?
55.
So what is, if you were given and granted more time, do you have the wherewithal to get it up to the code that the city's asking for? I mean, you talk about, in all things being fair, I'm an old construction guy myself. I mean, taking all things into account, being able to get all that work done in, say, 90 days or whatever, 60 days. Is that within your purview? I mean, you've had all these years, I'm assuming, as I look at this, that the thing is dilapidated over the years. So are you only willing to do this because the city's pushing your buttons right now? Is that the deal?
No, I've been working on it all the time.
You've been working on it all along.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking, what have you worked on so far?
Front part, what you see it all boarded up, already framed there.
On the back side of the building?
On the front side.
Is that the front side?
Facing the road.
Okay. That's
That, where you see all the board covered up and no doors, the door is there, but I just got it covered up. Because of people going in there and falling to the floor.
Well, though I don't disagree that procedure should be done prior to let's go demo the building or ask you to demo the building or whatever. Still raises that question mark for as long as you live there. Is this a reasonable expectation that you can, within a period of 60 days or 90 days, literally get all that work done? Or is this going to be back to us or back to whoever within that time frame say, well, I got some of it done, but didn't get all of it done? Because then I'm not really into the grandfather aspect of it. So therefore, I can't speak or attest to the permanent aspect. But I am questioning the abilities to work through what the city's requirements are, which you mentioned these. If you're not an HVAC or a plumber or electrician, irregardless, that's what I heard. Again,
I disagree.
that is written to me. I'm just simply asking questions because I don't know.
Yeah,
is the ability to get it done. I mean, you've had all these years of whatever, whether it be 1 year or 5 years or 50 years. I don't know the status of the building when you got it. That was obviously, it was intended to be residential whenever you bought it. It shows the value of that property somewhere in the $55,000 to $65,000 range. But the question is that the ability to get it back up to code in a time frame, that becomes the biggest one I would pose for us to be realistic. And if we're going to give leeway, then what is the actual expected leeway time? Because to me, 60 days, well, sort of, if you haven't done it by now, you probably can't get to it in 60 days to get all that. I mean, you might be able to, you might be a quite a little handyman or a construction, professional, but that's just a lot of work. Again, to look at this, it requires a lot of physical interaction pieces, and you use it. You say you work out that thing, right? So are you making money doing your construction job, and you use that as a site you work out, so you have to do your regular work as well? Is that correct?
Correct.
So again, part of my questions here get into what is a realistic expectation, because if you have to work for a living still, but they're given 60 days or 90 days, is that real? Because it's a lot of work.
No, I'm retired. I don't.
Well, you're done.
I don't. No, I've been retired for the last 12 years.
So that goes back to the wherewithal.
Son works at it. He won the construction.
He's the muscle.
Utility work. So
I go back again, is the wherewithal even, again, because obviously this building is in tremendously bad shape. And it looks like it's been there for a very long time in this same capacity. So,
Sure.
Yes, my name is Mathel Miller Jr. I'm the son of his son. I would really like to see if we could just get an extension time period where I could meet with the city on some things, get with my father on some things, and see what we could come up with to either build something else there or improve it. But the 60 days is not. Yeah, I mean, my dad's a great man, but that's unrealistic right now. But I would ask if we could get an extension, because we got I think the city served the warrant. We got notified by my neighbor that called me and said that the city and the fire department's over there, are you aware? And I came over, and that's when I met with him. So if we could get a little bit more time to search out the different options, let me get with him to see exactly what it is he really wants to do. And then I think we can come up with a better plan and better solution.
Okay. Ms. Skinner. Ms. Skinner's one of our alternate, our newest members. Her input, please.
If we did have to go and get permits, how long does that process take to get a permit? Is it a month, a week, or how long does that take to get that completed?
So permits typically are done on something like this within 2 weeks. And depending on the work that's being performed, it could require, such as the beam that's going across a garage, that could require an engineering evaluation on that to determine what repairs would need to be done to structurally bolster that structure enough to keep it from collapsing. The worst situation would be for us to issue a permit and do it in the blind and then not know that it was going to be adequate structurally and then have it collapse. So that would be the big issue. The other issue would be to make sure that there are adequate licensed personnel attached to the permit for the work that's being done. Regardless of the thoughts on it, it's clear that state law does require that work to be done by licensed personnel.
I'll just further go into when you try to assess something of this magnitude, I hear things that define as inhabitable, and what that brings back to with that trailer house is that the real expectation to bring it back to residential habitability? Is that what the city looks for? Or just something that's enclosed and safe and has the wherewithal to exist? Like again, I think as a whole, there's been some sense of not enough time given to you, even though you've occupied that residence or the land for a very long time. And it's unfortunate you're being pushed into, now you need to make a decision. But I think all things being fair, you should be allotted some time to work with the city. I just don't know what the rules will be within the city. If you get that permit, then does it roll back with us again at that point? And as a big Rowlett guy, I don't like any of these properties that look like this. For those of us who care for the city as much, we just want that thing to look really nice, at least habitable. And so, in fairness to you, sir, that what is reasonable. I think most of us are assessing the ideas in a way that perhaps you should have been more properly processed through due process, if you will, before you came to us. And we're pretty new at this part, though it's part of our other boards as well, but it still kind of comes down to what is realistic and the timing, because otherwise, as a resident, I wouldn't want to see that building there anymore if you're not going to be able to build it back. So, is it 90 days? And Dale, is that realistic? Yeah, this is a pot shot for at least for me anyway. I think about trying to take a structure this badly dilapidated today and try to get that thing back up. And then the unknown, I apologize, the unknown for us gets in this grandfather terminology that I'm listening to you and Mr. Berman the same thing about the unknown about the permitting pieces of it, but you're saying you still have to be permitted. He could probably stop it there, and if it's grandfathered in, again, I'm very permit kind of guy, but what is realistic there?
Dale, before you answer that, Commissioners, if I can provide some insight, because there has been some activity associated with this property, and I think it's important to provide that information so you can make a sound decision with all the facts before you. Absolutely, the code enforcement team has been in contact with the property owner or the person responsible for this property since 2018. We did pause from a code enforcement perspective during the COVID years deliberately, and that was our stance for most properties. The discussions that did occur between the code enforcement team and the property owners was, you cannot change your non-conforming use. You cannot add or subtract from your building unless it's a safety issue. You can't expand it. At one point, there was a missing ceiling for a roof, for example, and so the code team was trying to hold the applicant's hand, or this resident's hand, property owner rather, since this is not a residence, to try and facilitate. And we at that time did not have a Building Standards Commission. We had not adopted the IPMC, which we just recently did. So in terms of communication and talking about the requisite permits, those conversations have transpired, perhaps not on a monthly basis, perhaps not on a quarterly basis, but those conversations have occurred. So the concern, and if you read the report, the packet that is before you, it articulates that ideally, we'd love to ensure that this structure is no longer a dangerous structure. That is the key here. In terms of, which is a separate issue, in terms of extending the nonconformity, or has this use lost its nonconformity, that I agree is a slightly different issue. To convert it to saying I'm going to use it as a residence, that is not the wish of the developer. They use this area for their business. And that structure in some shape or form has resided on that property. So the question is, how much time would be necessary to bring this to code to ensure the safety of those utilizing the structure, to ensure the integrity of the structure. 60 days typically, if you have your permits in order, if you have your drawings in order, if you have the contractors that are necessary to do the work, then yes, it can be achieved. That is your prerogative to extend that timeline too. The elements that were cited in the presentation and what was presented in the report was provided to cite the code requirements and for us to provide to you the data related to the concerns that we have with this property to ensure the safety of not those just who utilize the building and enter it, but those that are, do walk around it too, because this is a business that is operating right now. So that is why we are before you today.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be reasonable if we, because this is the first issue to come before this commission, and there was a different process prior to tonight on this, what I think would be reasonable and also because there are all these other, I've heard it from the property owner, confusion in my mind about grandfathering, permits, and all these issues. I think that this case, the planning department and the property owner should get together and have the planning department, number one, clarify to the property owner the limitations of grandfathering the use of a property and the differentiation between that and a dangerous building, which is a separate issue. And also identify specifically the things that need to be done to bring it out of a dangerous structure category where his property will not be, into this process. So what I was thinking was that if there was like a 30-day delay, like a tabling of this, so that the city and the property owner could get together, since they've never had a meeting in the planning office, and I don't know what the code enforcement has done, because who knows who did that? I mean, I know they're your staff, but I'm just saying that we don't, it's different now. So I think in this particular case, to have a 30-day tabling of this item to give the city a chance to meet with the property owner and then take this back up from that point to what we do now. Because I really think that the property owner doesn't understand exactly what is involved with this dangerous structure issue. And I am certainly not going to support the city recommendation as it is tonight. I want to see it tabled.
And I'll just add one more thing with that, is that, and as correct as that would be, is that if it could be specific to the city, to the planning, what has to be done. This is where it gets lost, and I don't know if this is a major problem for the city planners, whoever it is to visit with this gentleman, but for them to know exactly, it's a very broad determination as to, hey, go fix the property. And I would only ask, again, 'cause this is one of the things for me nowadays has been concerning on multiple levels of other things, is being very specific in communicating, in this case to the applicant, about what is necessary to get the job done, and do it the first time so that you don't have to keep coming back, or keep going back to planning, or keep going back to whoever, keep doing things over and over because you didn't know to get all of it done or some of it done. I would only ask that it gets very specific to say, look, your building is not up to code. Bring it to code. You need to do this specifically, and don't say go fix the building.
And to answer your question earlier, the condition of the building, the time period, that's a very difficult question to answer, because as you get into older buildings, many times the cost to repair an older building is much greater than it would be to build a new one in its place. And to be honest, I've done probably 300 demolitions in my career working for cities, and I've never seen one get to this point and the property owner actually save that building or bring it back into compliance. It's just, I've never seen it. It's possible and it could happen. So that's the reason we did take the approach and request for demolition, because I just haven't seen that happen. But yes, he does have that right.
comment along the idea of tabling it or giving some number of days to come back with a firm proposal to get it into compliance. My concern initially is safety for people there, safety for the neighborhood, safety for a firefighter. If a firefighter had to go on the property for some reason, getting taken care of, no stray electrical hazards to anybody being there. I would like to see if anybody in the group has a motion to entertain that maybe we, I don't know if we can table with one stipulation or we just have to table it in general, but along the lines of get the electrical disconnected and then move, get this thing tabled for 30, 60 days until we get back with a firm plan to either, with the city and the property owner to either correct all the issues or remove the structure. But I think getting the safety thing addressed tonight, the electrical safety side of it is important to be done. Mr. Burton?
I think what you're suggesting is because of the public safety, the public safety issues because of the condition of the structure, that you would order it to be vacated and secured. And then it looks to me like the recommendation, at least from at least one of the commissioners, is to table the issue for 30 days and then reconsider and reconvene to see what's been done within that prior 30-day period regarding permit applications. I think first and foremost, although it's not my call, I would suggest that you seriously consider ordering the structure to be vacated and secured for that 30-day period if it's going to be tabled.
Are there issues with people breaking into there, like the homeless? Are you having those issues? I know you said you boarded up the door but people can get in from underneath. Are you having those issues where homeless or kids or whatever are getting in there and staying?
Not in the building.
Just on the property? And this is zoned residential, is that correct? Is that right? And you're wanting to use it as a non-residential, is that correct? Is that, did I understand that? No?
It's being used as a non-residential use.
But it's zoned residential?
It's zoned residential, correct.
Okay. So, I guess my question is it really, is it prudent to even consider using this as a non-residential use if it's not zoned residential? Is that allowed?
Fine line, because right now we're talking about the structure.
Right, I understand that.
But it is from the use standpoint, it is permitted even because it was here before the project was rezoned.
So that would be grandfathered.
It's a lawful non-conforming use.
Okay, so even though it was, okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So, and the reason I'm asking this, I understand the issues with the structure, but is it worth going through tabling it and finding out what needs to be done exactly, and you all evaluating the cost that is necessary to bring it up to code to do that work versus tearing it down if what your use is not going to be permitted? So that's not an issue. Is that, I just want to make sure we all understand.
The way I understand it, it's a non-compliant function. We're not talking about the structure at all.
Right.
They're using it as a non-compliant structure, but it's an allowable non-compliant. Now, they can't, if they want to fix it, it's got to comply with the current zoning. And that would be residential, not work. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it, these are all issues that need to be resolved during this possible 30-day tabling of the issue, that the planning department can explain completely to the property owner what's compliant, what's not compliant. If you want to comply, these are the things that got to be done. maybe it's been done by the code enforcement prior to this.
Absolutely. I know that conversations have transpired prior to 2018 even regarding this. So what we will do is, I think absolutely I agree, we will sit down at the table across from each other and go through the requirements, clearly articulate and explain what the zoning ordinance states from a non-conforming standpoint to, now if this structure doesn't even have a floor, for example, then we're talking bigger issues. And that's why we're here today, but I clearly understand, and your feedback is very well noted. 30 days, to sit down and have that conversation, maybe 45 days is sufficient from, the perspective of ensuring that they can come to the table with us, there'll be some back and forth, and we will take that time to explain those requirements, but there is a possibility that once they realize what the requirements are, that we'll be standing here again before you.
Well, can I get a clarification? There's actually 2 levels of opportunity here. There's one, the building needs to be made safe and secure for the public.
Correct.
And there's a second level, the building needs to be made safe and occupiable. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Is there electricity to that building now?
Yes. No.
Yes, no?
Well, there is no electricity. There is electricity to the property, but the electricity as of right now just goes to the front garage and to the back workshop. There's no electricity actually inside there's no electricity actually inside the mobile home. And that's the other issue with it being a mobile home. When you start trying to pull permits and stuff, it may not even work out. That's why I was saying we need to have, if we can get more time to sit and talk. I would say at least for 45 days, because I'm going to be out of the country for maybe like 10 days or so real soon. And that way we could come to some type of resolution on what needs to be done, what has to be done, what we can do, what we can't do, what are the other options, and hopefully get to just get something worked out.
The reason for my question was if we're going to table this for 30, 45 days and there's electricity.
Okay, I didn't mean to say that during that time we would address the cables that,
Okay,
yeah,
right.
we would address that.
And that was my concern, is if we're trying to secure this building while we're ironing out all the details, you are ironing out these details, that would be a big concern, is to make sure you have that electricity not going to that meter and through those non-compliant connections.
So yeah, those would just be removed.
Especially if you're going to be out of town, and there could be people on there and somebody could get hurt.
But yeah, the electrical wires are shown on the slide that those actually be taken care of.
Okay.
Commissioner Manhart, what we'll do is we'll ensure that staff accompanies you to show you what needs to be done to secure the building, so that so that you can leave with peace of mind for your next term.
Is the property insured? Is there homeowner's insurance on the structure?
So there's no liability insurance, or if it does catch fire, then you're at a loss to the total everything because it's uninsured.
Can I, is the commission ready to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. I recommend we table this item for 45 days and allow the city and the property owner to meet together to thoroughly discuss the issues of grandfathering in uses, non-compliant buildings, dangerous issues with the buildings that exist, and what specifically needs to be done to bring these buildings up to standards, or what will happen after we reconvene, and should we decide to support the city's side on this argument, that there will be a 60-day window where you either comply or the other issue, everything else comes in. But right now, I think that we should table this item for at least 45 days.
Susan, do you have that before I ask for a second? The comment, sir. So basically, it was a table for 45 days. It was the
And have the city planning department meet with the property owner to discuss specifics with the grandfathering issues and specific requirements to restore this to a compliant structure.
I think we need to adjust that to clarify that the building needs to be made safe within a certain amount of time.
And to makes the building safe with the electricity, as you can adjust my motion to make the building safe within, I don't know.
To secure the building.
To secure the building as soon as practicable, or if, where's our city building inspector?
Just say secure the building.
How long would it take them to secure the power on that place, so we don't have a dangerous situation there?
They should be able to do it within a week.
Okay, so within 7 days, make the facility safe to meet the city's requirement for making the building safe, and reconvene after 45 days to revisit this issue in total. Does that make sense to my fellow commissioners?
I know I'm out of order, but Susan, not to put you on the spot. Do you have that? You could reiterate.
Yeah.
So we know we have
Table it for 45 days. The main issue, city to meet with the property owner, and the property owner has 7 days to make the facility safe, specifically with the electricity. Is that, what is my fellow commissioners?
Is there work being done in that garage as far as his business? So if it cuts off the electricity back there, will he still be able to?
Well, I mean, you know, if it's dangerous, it's dangerous, and you know, we're.
He can take care of that.
Yeah.
It's not an issue. The big issue is going to be disconnecting the light that's in the front and then providing for the proper connection to the back garage.
Okay.
I'm almost wondering if we should, instead of 45 days, 60 days would make more sense. That way our meetings would not be affected. And maybe, let me reword my tabling motion. I would like to recommend this be tabled for 60 days with the applicant given a week to make the property safe regarding the electricity usage. And during that 60-day period, the property owner meet with the planning department and understand completely what is required here. Because I really think, you know, you got a big project down there, and I don't think it's fully understood yet. And I want to make sure that everybody knows what's got to be done here. So that's my motion.
I have a second from the board member. For clarification, the sitting board today, Ms. Skinner is one of our alternates, and we've asked her to sit at the diocese. By state law, she's not allowed to vote on the board today because she's an alternate, not a member. So we have our members, full majority here. So I'll be clear on that.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Tony has seconded the motion. We need to vote. How's it going to vote for us?
Just raise hand.
There we go. So we got all 5 of the affirmative. So the motion passes. So we have 60 days, as explained earlier, to work with the city staff, and 7 days to secure the electricity to make it safe. At this time, I think we have no further business. I'd like to thank Mr. and Mr. Miller, I assume, for being in our city and working with us. And we adjourn the meeting at no other business at 10 minutes after 8.